Hey, what's going on everybody? Commander Crane here, and we are back with another Pioneer deck tech, and today we're going to be talking about Selesnya Anti-Graveyard, our second video featuring decks that are trying to hate on specific archetypes. Last time we went over control decks, and then now we are doing Graveyard. So a couple things before we hop into the video here. The first thing is Sarwanoki. This deck is for you, longtime channel member here for Commander Crane, and they recommended, hey, why don't you do a deck that hates on Arclight Phoenix, you know, like just some budget deck that'll hate on the deck. And I decided to take it a step further, not only do Arclight Phoenix, but all the other Graveyard decks that are in the format, so like all the Reanimate decks, as well as like Grease Fang. But the other thing is, at the end of the video, let me know in the comment section below, is there a specific card that I definitely should have put in this deck that I did not? Or do you have suggestions for upcoming videos? Just let me know in the comment sections. Okay, so the idea with this deck is it all makes sense in a vacuum. Obviously, we'll go over all the different pieces of the deck, but essentially, we're going to have our cards that are going to hate on the graveyard. We're going to have some cards that are kind of annoying to interact with, or really extremely hard or almost impossible to interact with. It'll all make sense. Let's go ahead and start with our 1-drops. We're playing 4 copies of Veteran Survivor, 4 copies of Dried Militant, and 2 copies of Paw Pet Recruit as our main 1-drop. So Veteran Survivor is obviously great because in your second main phase, if it's tapped, you can exile a card, and then if we exile enough, it gets +3/+3 and hexproof. So it's a huge fan of Veteran Survivor. Dried Militant is somewhat similar, but if an instant or sorcery card would be put into a graveyard from anywhere, exile it instead. So that's obviously fantastic against Izzet Phoenix, just because, you know, all their cantrips that they start playing goes into exile, which is fantastic. It's obviously harder for them to cast like their treasure cruises and such. And then Paw Pet Recruit, overall, it's just a really, really good card. The main thing is whenever a creature you control becomes the target of a spell or an ability an opponent controls, put a +1/+1 counter on a target creature you control other than that creature. So essentially against Izzet Phoenix, if they're trying to, you know, Lightning Axe and Fiery Impulse like all of our creatures, our other creatures will get a little bit bigger, which is obviously really, really good. So definitely a huge fan of the Paw Pet Recruit as well. Next slide here, we have a whole swath of creatures that love to exile graveyards. We're playing 4 copies of Sun Gold Sentinel, 4 copies of Scavenging Ooze, and 4 copies of Cutsil's Flanker, which is not surprising to anyone because it is overall, it is honestly the thumbnail. So Sun Gold Sentinel I really, really like too, just because it gives hexproof and can't be blocked by creatures of that color, so it's kind of like protection, essentially is protection overall, but I like that. Scavenging Ooze, obviously a long time strong card. Just being able to exile cards from graveyards just for a green is super strong, and we gain a little bit of life too, which is nice. And then Cutsil's Flanker, obviously, it's just a really good card. You got the flash on there, exile a creature, you know, exile target player's graveyard. You know, if you don't need to exile their graveyard because we're already hating on their graveyard a bunch, you know, we can get a nice other ability on top of that as well. So the next slide here it may seem a little confusing at first, but it'll make sense in a moment here. Okay, so 4 copies of Basara Tower Archer and 4 copies of Witchstalker. The idea behind these is they are just cheap hexproof threats that are, you know, like Izzet Phoenix, again, is going to have a hard time getting rid of these just because their removal spells are going to be irrelevant. They're not going to be able to Fiery Impulse, or they're not going to be able to Lightning Axe any of these creatures. But what we're really trying to do with these specific creatures is we're trying to put these enchantments on them. 4 Sheltered by Ghosts and 4 Unflinching Courage. Just being able to give our creatures a little bit of power boost as well as some lifelink is incredibly strong. Obviously, we can put these on any of our creatures. You know, we get a big Scavenging Ooze going. We put an Unflinching Courage on it. Essentially, it's going to be game over. But at least with the hexproof creatures, you know, there's no option for like the sneaky one of Otawara, or if like any of the Atraxa decks, if they're playing, you know, a very, you know, like a Go for the Throat or something. And like, obviously, Sheltered by Ghosts does give ward too, which helps a little bit, but Unflinching Courage, putting that on like a non-hexproof creature can be a little bit dangerous, so we want to try to avoid that. But overall, that's what we're trying to do in this deck. We're trying to play cheap creatures that hate on the graveyard. We're trying to play a few cheap hexproof creatures, put on a Sheltered by Ghosts or Unflinching Courage, and start turning them sideways and get the game over with. That's what we're trying to do in this deck. So let's go and hop into the land base real quick, which obviously we are a budget deck after all. So we're obviously going to be playing some budget dual lands. 4 Razorverge Thicket, 4 Branchlaw Pathway, and 4 Brushland are our main dual lands. We're also playing 4 Restless Prairie and 2 Lair of the Hydras as our main man lands. And then rounding out our lands, we are playing 2 basic forests and 2 basic plains. And as our spicy basic land of the day, these are actually the planes and the force that I like to play in my Selesnya decks. I know I've been playing a lot of Wiltleaf Aggro, which is a deck I featured here on the channel a while ago, and these are the lands that I play in the deck just because I've always been a huge fan of these Zendikar lands. So, don't go anywhere yet though. We still have to talk about our sideboard as well as some upgrade options for our budget deck here. So, sideboarding is going to be really simple. More graveyard hate. We have Rest in Peace in the sideboard. That's really all we need to do for the most part, just because we have so many graveyard hating cards already. And I'll be honest, we really don't even need the Rest in Peace, but we got to play them because of the flavor reasons of this deck. We're also playing Portable Hole and Fateful Absence as really nice removal spells. You can bring them in a number of different matchups, but they are very good. Surge of Salvation, it's a way to help protect our creatures against more removal spells, and Anger of the Gods. Obviously, Surge of Salvation prevents all the damage by red sources, so that's why we are playing the Surge of Salvation. And then we're also playing a few copies of Pick Your Poison, just because there's a lot of really good artifacts and enchantments in the metagame right now, but also big beefy flyers like Atraxas. Obviously, we don't like Atraxa being on the battlefield, so that's why we're playing Pick Your Poison to help get rid of that. And then the last thing we have to talk about is the upgrade options for this deck, which it's pretty simple. The Shocks and the utility lands, upgrade those, get Aganjos and Passagius and Temple Gardens and things like that. And then Get Lost is obviously really good for the sideboard. You could also put it in the main, but I just have it in the sideboard currently. But that's it. All the creatures are still the exact same between the budget list and the non-budget list. Our current list, as it's constructed right now, including the sideboard, is only $58 US, which is super cheap for a Pioneer deck, but I was able to get the upgraded list to 151, and I mean that's like pushing it too, and so which is really cheap for a Pioneer deck just because all of our creatures are already really cheap and really good, which is nice for the deck. So once again, huge shout out to Sarah Winoki, longtime channel member here, really wanted to do a budget list here on the channel, so that's why we featured this very spicy anti-graveyard deck. So let me know in the comment section below if you have a deck somewhat similar to this, or if you end up building this deck just to hate on all of the graveyard decks at your local FNM. Just let me know in the comment section below if you end up building this deck. So that takes us to the end of the video here. Thanks so much for watching. The deck lists are in the description below if you'd like to check them out for yourself. Huge shout out to our channel members, Ralph, Matt, Arcadius, Ray, Gary, Sarwanoki, and Night Red 3. If you're interested in being a channel member, it's only $1 US a month. You get access to the exclusive Commander Crane Discord, as well as other features here on the channel. And we are currently on our way to 1,000 subs. You should definitely consider subscribing to the channel here, because there's going to be a huge giveaway once we hit 1,000 subscribers. So, I'm Commander Crane. Thanks for watching this video, and I hope to catch you in the next one.